Welcome to the Life Transform podcast. I'm Simcha.
And I'm Sarah, and we are here chatting, sharing real life, real stories,
Deep truths, all about living a life transformed.
It's all about how God impacts our life and how we're changed and how our life becomes a significant impact in the lives of other people.
We're going to be here every week for this season.
So make sure that you subscribe and join the journey.
Welcome back to another episode here, coming at you, the Life Transform podcast from Israel. Simcha here with...
Hello. That's a reference to the first season.
The famous tree. Sarah makes an entrance.
Hello.
It's become her signature move. We are really excited to join you this week. We've got some really cool stuff to talk about. Probably our favorite topic in the world.
Absolutely.
Definitely the most enjoyable.
Mm.
But before we do, I wanted to bring up something that has developed in my life, which, you know, it's a little bit of a
I'm already scared
habit and a slightly addictive, and that is
chocolate.
No. It's a habit I've developed, which I'm actually very happy about and intend to keep it. And that is what I like to call my lo-fi rituals. Let me explain. So my life has become, you know, due to Corona, a lot quieter and slower. And during the COVID lockdowns that we experienced, there was a lot more time spent at home and a lot more people in the house. And one of the ways that I started to cope with said people was to put on some lo-fi music on the TV and just let it play for hours and hours and hours.
For those people who don't understand what lo-fi is, what is lo-fi?
It's like really chill, slow, kind of jazzy, almost kind of electronic music that is very relaxing. It's not like spa music. It's not that kind. It's a little bit more poppy than that, but it's no words. It's very relaxing. If you want a good channel to check out, because I highly recommend it, there's one called Chill Hop, which has hours and hours and hours of these kinds of, well, it's actually continuous tracks. It's not even individual tracks. It's just ongoing, never-ending music.
Note, we are not sponsored by...
No, not sponsored in any way. They don't know we exist. But it's a great... It just became this really great source of peace, actually. It just brought everybody down a little bit, calmed everybody down, even the dog. In the storms, because our dog is a traumatized dog, and she gets freaked out when there's weather of any kind. Mm-hmm. If she's not outside in hot sun, she's freaked out
because she's a rescue dog.
She's a rescue dog, and she's very traumatized. And the thing that scares her the most is rain and thunder. So even in those weathers, this music just chilled her out. She was chill. But one of the things I've started doing is every Thursday, we clean the house in the afternoon to kind of round the week off, so we don't have to do anything on the weekends. And even my kids now know this is a thing. Mum does this thing on Thursdays, and that is you put the lo-fi on, you clean the house from top to toe, everybody together. We do it as a family, all of us. We all have our little things that we do, our corners. And when it's to mummy standard, i.e. I have checked and my OCD has been satisfied, I go round and I light my candles in the downstairs. And that signifies to the kids that sibling night has ensued, cleaning is finished, and date night is beginning for parents, which means everybody's very happy. So lo-fi in my house is really the signal of happiness and fun.
I think it's good to say, because, you know, people would say, okay, why don't you put worship music on to relax and calm down? And I think...
Because it's not always relaxing.
A, and B, instrumental music, because you don't have to deal with words and you're not kind of... That part of your brain can kind of just...
Calm
down a bit is helpful. I love listening to instrumental music. Even just, you know, classical music pieces that I love that are very beautiful. Because that part of your brain that's processing language doesn't have to, you know, be interacting with the music. it's helpful to kind of take that down. And so that's a good tip on just being able to be more chill, more relaxed. I think it is important, though, to understand that there is spirit behind music. And so when you're making your choices, choose well, so that, you're not bringing something in that you don't want to bring in. But we've had, some of that music on as well sometimes in our house. I think there's been so many people all the time, 24/7 around each other in confined, closed spaces that sometimes just putting some music on and everybody kind of being quiet and just listening to music is helpful.
Yeah, no, I think one of the things we noticed was that when we put music on that had words, like whether it was worship music or whatever it is, the thing that ends up happening is you watch the music videos that go with it. And so it becomes an actual watching activity. Whereas with these channels and this kind of music, what I started seeing happen was the kids would go and grab a book, or they'd pull out some artwork or puzzles or whatever. And it became actually a really restful moment in the family. And so I've actually started doing it a lot more often, even just with, there's so many great YouTube channels where there's like cafe jazz, and the picture, it's not a video, it's just a picture of rain. We love rain, but rain from a cafe. And it's just this great, like chill, jazzy music that you can just, in the middle of Corona, I used to find myself, staring at the TV screen, imagining I was in a cafe in the rain and enjoying, being alone in a cafe, but no such luck.
Imagination.
Yeah, it was great. But it's like when we put the fireplace on the TV in the winter, just to pretend to be warmed up by the flames.
Actually, your husband has a great one, because Simcha's husband found one where you don't just see the fire, but it actually does this little crackling sound.
Yeah, 8 hours.
8 hours of fire with a crackling sound.
Yeah.
Which brings us to today's topic, which is brilliant.
It's our favorite thing to do.
It is simply defined, one word only: rest.
Yeah.
I think one of the most important things to note, I guess, in this whole topic of rest is I love rest. And this year has taught me so much about rest and how important it is and how necessary it is. And it's really funny because, everyone initially in this year of COVID, it really enjoyed, I think, the pause, the stopping. I remember the first lockdown we experienced, it was very sudden. We were seeing videos of people keeling over in China, falling down and like dying in the street. And so Israel stopped everything, locked everything down, closed the airport, and stopped life, and we went into full blown lockdown, just food shops, nothing else,
Way before we needed to, actually.
Absolutely. There wasn't anything, and they tried to stop it. And so we went from full on to an abrupt stop in Israel because of COVID. And, initially I was so thankful. I remember, I sat in my garden, I did nothing. It was such a big change compared to everything else that was going on before it. God had already spent, time speaking to me personally about rest in 2019, interestingly enough. And this is a funny story, but this is how he did it. He gave my husband and I a gift of going away, which we basically haven't done since we've had children, and just gave us this incredible gift of being able to go away for a few days and truly rest. And I remember God was already talking to me about seasons of rest, and I was actually invited to speak at a women's event, and they had a particular topic to me to speak about. And when I was praying, I really felt like God asked me to talk about rest. And so I went back and I said, to the organizers, would it be okay if I spoke about rest? And they said, yes, absolutely. And so I'd preparing all this talk that I was going to talk to them about and why. And then the lockdown happened and the event was canceled, and it's been, a year. And it hasn't happened yet because, we don't have the ability to meet in those numbers in the country. So it was really a personal, talk from God to me through me kind of researching this idea. And so I think the first most obvious thing we want to say about rest is that it's commanded in the Bible, right? The Sabbath. And, living in Israel is very significant in terms of the Sabbath, isn't it? Because we have a Sabbath, a real Sabbath here, probably more than in other countries.
Other than Chick-fil-A, which closes on Sundays.
That's a USA chicken food chain in the States. So if you're not American and you're listening, that's what that is. And then they close for a day a week. But, we have a rhythm of life here that has a day where most of the shops, restaurants, everything is closed. It shuts down. And in many, many, many other countries, that's not the case anymore because they're not founded on the biblical principles of rest. And, the world's point of view is if I can have my shop open 7 days, 24/7, I'll make more money. The world's perspective is if I can have my business and my restaurant going, I'll do better. The world's perspective is how many more shifts can I cram into the factory working? The world's perspective is doing more and more and more. And I think we need to look at the biblical perspective, God's perspective on it. It was important enough for God to tell us to rest that he put it in the 10 commandments, of the 10 things that he says to humanity, this is how to live. The Sabbath is in there, one of 10. God tells us, commands us to have the Sabbath 1 day out of 7 where we fully rest, where we fully stop. And agriculturally, God also gives the land time to rest. So it's not just people. It's, in fact, all of creation. When we observe how God laid out life on earth, he provides rest for all of his creation.
Yeah, it's actually really interesting being here in Israel because you can drive around regularly. I mean, I don't know how it works, whether everybody observes the same cycle or if everybody has their own cycle, but you regularly see signs on farms where there's just nothing happening. It's all, they've not tended the land, nothing's happening, there's no crop. And then you'll see this big sign that translates to, we observe the Shabbat, which is like the 7th year of resting the land, so that when you resow and you renew your crops and you sow that new crop, it actually, something happens in that 7-year cycle agriculturally that refreshes the land with nutrients and fills all the soil with extra
bacteria and all the things it needs.
So that when that crop is sown, it's doubly as good. And it's actually a biblical principle that people here observe. And it makes no sense. If your business is your farm and you can't produce for a year, that doesn't make any sense. But somehow they figure it out. I don't know how they work it out financially in the business. I don't know. But it's incredible to me as an outsider that's moved here to see the importance of this Shabbat and that Sabbath rest. And, one of the things that I remember very, very early on in our time in Israel was walking around our neighborhood, which was in a big city. Now we live in the countryside, but when we lived in this large city, you'd walk around in our neighborhood and it was 4-5 o'clock in the afternoon on a Friday. And all you would see and hear is families in their living rooms, laughing, chilling, playing, hanging out, cooking, music, guitars. And it's like the exhale at the end of the week, And I think one of the things that we learned very early on, well, there's a few things we've learned while being here with regards to this, but first of all, it's a discipline. And it's so easy to figure out a way around. Actually in Israel is another really good example of this, is there are so many cultures here. If you really want to get out of your Shabbat and you really want to go shopping, you totally can. I think we've even mentioned this, for the Muslims, their Shabbat is a Friday. For the Jewish people, their Shabbat is a Saturday. And for the Christians, it's a Sunday. So actually you could go, if you want to go shopping on your Saturday and you're Jewish, you just go to a Muslim town or you go to a Christian town and you can still find all their shops open. So if you want to get out of it, you can. But the point is we shouldn't. And that's a discipline. And it's something that, to actually force yourself to not engage with certain conversations, certain technology, emails, dealing with certain messages, and actually to not allow your brain to engage with those things just for 1 day or a day and a half is hard. it's hard to do because everything in you wants to keep the momentum going, and just deal with that because it would just help me relax. Or, you know, I'm super chill, so I'm just gonna grab my laptop and answer a bunch of emails because I've got nothing to do. It's kind of the natural, everything in you wants to take advantage of the free time to dust off some stuff, but it's not good for us to live like that. It's not good for our soul to never hit the off switch. You know, God could have created on the seventh day. He leads by example. He showed us exactly how he wants us to live, and he created and went nuts on every other day of the week. You know, observe that he did create day and night, so it wasn't just non-stop, but he took the seventh day. He did not create. He could have done. Was he tired? No. He is God. He just made the Milky Way. It's not hard for him to keep going for another day, but he chose not to. And we have to make that same choice.
I think it's easier also in Hebrew because, you know, we have this word Sabbath in English. It doesn't actually make any sense. Yeah. It just sounds. But it comes from the word Shabbat, which comes from a word shevet, which means to sit. Mm-hmm. And so that's also where we get the word strike from, shvita in Hebrew, which means striking. It means not working. It means not doing. And so, you know, the Sabbath rest, I hear this concept when I go outside of Israel. In Hebrew, we have Shabbat. It means literally to sit down.
And when you say striking, you don't mean hitting, you mean like to go on strike. Like we are going on strike.
Yes, sorry. Work strike. So this word to sit, you know, is really to cease from. It defines what you're not doing. And I love this, that if you look at creation, as you brought it up, the week of creation, there's 6 days of work, and man is created on the final day, on the sixth day. So that when man wakes up for the first time in the morning, the first day Adam ever lived was a day of rest.
Yeah.
The first day Adam ever lived was a day to be with God. It wasn't to toil. It wasn't to work. It wasn't to tend the garden. It wasn't to do anything but to rest and to be with God. And I think that that's really important for us to understand as human beings, that we are designed, we are programmed, we are made, we are created to need this element of rest, which will change the fruitfulness of our life, will change our ability to function as transformed into the image of God by doing the example that God has set for us, which is rest is biblical, rest is mandated by the Bible, and I really encourage you to do that. If you don't have this, well, you called it a discipline. I enjoy it, but if you don't have this in your life, I would really, really encourage you to establish a pattern of one day where you don't actually do anything. You don't go almost anywhere. Maybe you go out to nature, maybe do something that inspires you or something fun, but really try to kind of turn the dial down, you know, and see what that does in your life. And I'm sure that it will greatly improve, you know, your abilities and everything in your life.
I so agree. You know, being, like I said, we came from outside in to this culture, and it's something that we always admired and looked forward to doing. But you know, it doesn't happen by itself. It's so hard. It doesn't just, that seventh day, that sixth day, just being free and turning that dial down, it doesn't happen automatically because it happens to be a Saturday. You know, you have to prepare for it, and you have to exercise the word no very much. It's a very important word. You have to learn to say no. And you also have to learn what it is you need to rest. And that is two things that will completely change your life. You know, this is part when I was talking earlier about my lofi rituals. This is what it is. This is about me preparing for rest, because if I don't, life just takes over that space. It's like if you have a child with a white canvas, and you give them a paintbrush and you just let them keep going and keep going and keep going, they will cover that whole thing with paint all over. There will be no white left. And that's what will automatically happen with our rest if we don't learn when is the time to stop and to turn off and to prepare the space for resting. And that's something that I exercise and take very seriously in my life. I understand my environment affects how I can or cannot rest, which is why I clean last thing on Thursday to prepare for the rest of the weekend, so that my environment feeds the rest and, you know, supports that rather than causes stress or gives me stuff to do.
Yeah. I think in our family, you know, adding to that, we have a rule. I mean, obviously, so just to define it back to the biblical side and how that applies practically to our life, we do not work at all in any way, shape or form from sundown on Friday to sunup on Sunday, essentially.
Yeah.
Ultimately, Sabbath is sundown on Friday to sundown on Saturday. So it's, you know, a full 24-hour space. So we will not do anything that, you know, is paying us, you know, nothing to do with work. But we've also instilled this rule, which is we don't discuss work.
Yes.
So we important. Take 24 hours where the topics of work and life outside, you know, whatever that is, your ministry, anything, you know, it's not something that's discussed. We're not trying to conversate. We're not trying to sort it out, solve it, think on it. We take time, you know. My husband, we've been having this conversation literally this week about him, you know, and what recharges him and what, you know, how he can rest. He works extremely hard, many, many, many long hours. And so, you know, he really needs to have that possibility to kind of recharge himself. However, we are parents, we have 3 kids. So when he comes home after a long day at work, you know, there's all this other people who need him and you know, energy that's given out and outlaid. And he loves listening to Bible teachers. So, you know, for him to take a day and just listen to people teach the Bible, he loves learning about the Bible and all those kind of things. And so that to him is rest, you know. He wants to just go into a zone that's so different to work and draws him closer to God. And so, you know, rest needs to be guarded.
Yeah.
It needs to be guarded. It needs to be purposeful. And when we do that, you know, we understand. So let's say you're building a fortress, you know, so you need a tower and you need a gate and you need a wall, you know, and that's how we need to think about rest as well. So if you're analyzing, you know, your rest day and you start to find things that are causing that stress or that churn or that thing, start to, you know, take them out, start to build a wall around and make a place of true, real rest in your life. I think another really important point to bring up is that rest is not idle. You know?
Yeah. It's like not laziness.
Yes. It's not the same thing as just sitting around doing quote unquote nothing. I know people who go, if I sit and do nothing, I'll just go nuts. You know, like they can't understand that. And God's Sabbath, God's rest is not an idle rest. It wasn't about doing absolutely nothing, you know. It was about that time of recharging. It was about that time of being with him. It was about that time
refreshing. It's hitting reset. That's how we approach it in our house. We actually, with the kids, we've through the years we've done different things, but that is the kind of underlying thing that always underpins everything. It's a chance to lay the week to rest. Like let's unplug and recharge and all these issues and these things and these stresses. It could even be that writing them down and putting them in a jar and committing those things to God as a family at the end of the week. Okay, that's it. It's done. Finished. Now we start a new week and we're starting it by resting and we are hitting reset. We've hit reset on the house. Everything is back to where it should be. It's in the rightful order. And that's kind of what we're doing in ourselves. Like the house and the lofi and the candle and all of that is my way of outworking what we're doing in ourselves. We're hitting the reset. We're putting everything back in order. We're taking the time to just be rather than fixing. And actually, if those stresses and conversations about work can't be put down, I would probably challenge a different issue maybe there about priorities or, you know, things being in balance or idols or these things. We should be able to come home from work and leave work at work and focus on what and who is in the house with us and leave it. And it can't be all we think about and all we talk about and all we do. We have to have this healthy balance with life. And I think the commitment to the discipline of rest, because it's committing to doing something every week, even when actually you feel like you should be at the office or you should be answering those emails. Actually, that's not how God made this. He didn't make us to also do a bit of work on Sunday, by the way, or Saturday, or whichever day it is that you observe it. But one of the things I did want to ask you is, what would you say to all those people out there who are not in Israel, with this brought to them on a plate by the culture? In the UK or in America, Europe, you have Sundays and you have church, let's say. So what do you do when your off day? I mean, most of the time you would have a Saturday as well, so you could maybe choose which day you want to make your rest day. But what do you do when your rest day is full of church and people and stuff and all this? I mean,
how did you make that sound? I love that you asked that question, and I think that it starts from hopefully some understanding that you're gaining listening to us talk about this right now, that this is God-given keys to success in life. Yeah. This is a God-given key. It's one of 10 keys. And so we understand thou shalt not murder, don't lie, don't, all this stuff, but like Sabbath is thrown out, and I'm not going to go into the idea of whether it has to be on a Saturday or Sunday or Friday. My point is that it's the principle of taking 1 and 7. And maybe in your world, you're in ministry, and Sunday, ultimately Sunday's a work day, So make Monday your rest day. You need a full 24 hours that are turning the dial down and are a recharge station for you. And I would just like to note, binge watching your favorite series might not necessarily be Sabbath. What I'm trying to say by that is, it might be like mind numbing, and kind of take you out. But when I believe when God created that Sabbath, it wasn't for just stopping as much as it was for that opportunity to be filled, to be, to have that time with God. And so it's a time without striving, but it's also not a time to just be feeding your soul with, a bunch of other things that are not building up and edifying. So you want to strike that balance. So I would say to you this: I strongly believe that you do need to find at least a 12 to 18 hour window in your weekend somehow. And that might mean saying no to things. It might mean saying no to stuff, to be able to do that. Find that way to create that time of quote unquote sitting, in your life. And you will see a complete change in just the resources that you have to handle life, to handle things, to handle work, to handle people. This is a God-given tool, key, help for us to be able to do that. And, for us, we've had to make changes and make adjustments, even challenging the traditional way of doing things. Like, so for us in our community, which we were talking about in the previous podcast, we've made a decision not to have something every Saturday, or in a Christian environment that would be every Sunday. So we alternate Fridays and Saturdays, so that you actually end up being able to have this kind of full day of rest that we don't even have a meeting in. And so you're not even quote unquote doing that bit. And what that allows for is cementing in a rhythm of rest. And it helps us to protect it. Because we don't have to, and we, like you were saying, we live here next to the community house, but we're also highly aware of the fact that other people in the community have to get in their car and drive over here, And so if you're human, this one, right? The pressure, the stress, get out, get on time, the fighting that goes on, the whatever that's happening, that's not God's will for our life. This pressure, this stress, this endless drive. God's will for our life is that we would have that time where everything kind of shuts down, everything quietens down. The best example that I have for a proper Sabbath is what actually happens on the Day of Atonement in Israel, Yom Kippur. So because this is the Jewish nation, the Day of Atonement, which happens in the fall season, we have an incredible thing that happens in this country, and it is my favorite day. I know it's a day of awe, but it's my favorite day. in Israel. And here's why, because nobody drives. So imagine this. No one works. No one plays loud music. No one has big parties. No one drives. And
It's
I don't
the
know
day
if
of
you know.
bicycles.
Yeah, the kids are out on the roads and stuff, but I don't know if you understand how much the hum of traffic, even if you don't live, on a road or you live near a road, unless you're far out in the countryside and you are blessed, there is a word, there is a hum, there is a sound that's continually happening. There's gardeners with their machines and there's always noise around you. And on this one day, 24 hours, there is total silence in Israel as a country. It's one of the most incredible feelings I've ever felt. It's a fully day of quiet. And whenever I hit that day, I recognize that's actually what God designed as a Sabbath, a full Sabbath. If you go to ultra religious neighborhoods in Israel, the same thing happens on a Shabbat, on the Saturday.
Yes.
They don't drive, they don't cook, they don't light fires, they don't do so many things. Sadly for them, it's become this whole religious thing. But it is what God wanted for us. And I really believe that God wants this for us because he wants us to be able to recharge. And I love this verse in Isaiah 43:19. It says, "Behold, I will do a new thing. Now it shall spring forth. Shall you not perceive it?" And I think that is an incredible thing that God is doing. God is saying, I'm doing a new thing, and it's coming forth now. Will you see what I'm doing?
Yeah.
And it is impossible to see when you're running at full speed ahead.
It's so true.
When you are running really, really fast, or when you're driving in a car and the scenery is going by so quickly, or imagine a bullet train, right? The scenery is going past you so quickly that there's no way that you can stop and actually perceive and see. It's not even just seeing, it's perceiving. It's a seeing with an understanding. And that's what God wants. He says, I will even make a way in the wilderness and rivers in the desert. I believe that that's God saying to us, stop, slow down, stand, rest, recharge, because I want to make a way in the wilderness for you. I want to make a place of rivers, a place of life, a place of abundance for you in the desert place that you find yourself in. So if you're listening to this and you feel like you're on the rat on the wheel, running and running and running and running, please, I implore you, establish this discipline of Sabbath in your life. Establish a discipline of rest, because it's when we stop and we look that we can observe the thing that God is doing, that he wants to do in our life.
So good. So good. And for me, I think it goes even a step beyond that, because we talked in the last episode about fruitfulness and bearing fruit in our lives. And I think this for me has become very connected to rest, because, God is looking for people who are faithful with what he's given them. And he has given us time, and he's given us structure, and he's given us a way of measuring time. He created days and nights, and he created weeks, and he created this seventh day of rest. And if we're faithful with that time and we steward it well, which he has set out in his, the 10 commandments and his example of not doing anything on that seventh day, it creates that healthy rhythm in life. It does. There's no debate in that. I've experienced life both ways, the UK rat race, and not having a day off really, and thinking Sunday's your day off, even though I'm working 19 hours for church and kids and youth and whatever, compared to coming here and doing and really disciplining our family rhythm to involve this day a week and prepare for it, and to train the kids to respect it. And on Friday nights, they don't go out with their friends. They are home. It's family night. It's a quiet, and we might bring people in, we might host people, we might have family, we might have whatever, but it's respected and it's honored. That creates a very healthy rhythm of life. And when God sees that he can trust you with what he's given you, because you're being faithful with what he's given you and you're observing his example of that, he will give you more. He will trust you with more. And that's fruitfulness. That's what we're talking about in the last episode about, finding that place of influence and how that can bring fruit. It's all part of that same principle, that from observing these principles that God's laid out for us, it bears more fruit and growth.
That's so right. I was thinking as we were talking about this, I love that you brought this idea up about the rat race and doing and doing and doing. We confuse doing with fruitfulness.
Yeah, we do.
And just because you're doing does not mean that you're being fruitful. And I wrote this piece a few years ago, and it's called Defending Martha.
Oh, yeah.
And it really came from this place that, for many, many, many years, it's the story of Martha and Mary, if you don't understand what I'm referring to, the sisters of Lazarus. And I remember reading that many times and being irked kind of by Yeshua, Jesus, his reprimand of Martha, okay? Because Mary, he says she chose the better part. She was sitting at his feet, and Martha was getting stuff done, and I love getting stuff done. Yeah. And I put a premium on getting stuff done.
Yeah.
And I don't like the people that don't like to get stuff done.
Yeah, we don't like people who don't help us. Come on.
And, and because I'm like, these like frou-frou, whatever, I don't know, God will provide kind of, I'm just going to go through my life. And
it's like the poor guy who reached out to stabilize the cart with the poor guy who died.
Yeah.
Why? Because he tried to do it. He tried to fix it. He tried to, and the instruction was don't touch
it. So Martha, my friend, I think she's awesome, and she needed to make sure people were fed. By the way, if you're sitting and listening to endless hours and hours of teaching, at a certain point, people get hungry. They need to eat. They need to be taken care of. She was doing the practical stuff.
Good woman.
I agree, and so that's why I wrote this piece, and I wanted really to defend her case, to defend her point of view. And I think that, if we're talking about the transformed life, and in one way that I would say, how has my life been transformed through my journey and my walk with God, is that God has had to teach me about sitting still. God has had to teach me about the value of rest. God has really had to allow me to kind of, be stopped. And if you would say, what has COVID done? What has it taught me? This is one of the major things. And it's really funny to me, in a good way, that God was already speaking to me in my life before it was coming. So he was kind of preparing me. He was kind of setting me up for the fact that when COVID hit and my life so abruptly stopped, from like 100 miles an hour to 0, that choosing to sit by the feet of God, choosing to sit and just be and receive and be replenished and be refilled, this is the better part. This is the better part than making sure things are taken care of and doing things, to me, that's an abhorrent thought, because I absolutely think that things should be organized. They should be, there should be a plan. We need to execute and let's get going, this whole I'm just going to sit here and rest and somehow it's going to happen,
I think it's so important what you're saying. And I just want to observe that over this year where we have learned probably more than ever about the importance of rest, in the last episode, we shared a little bit about what's happening in our community, but alongside of that, Sarah and I have also developed a CrossFit habit. And it's rest is not about lounging around on the sofa and not moving.
CrossFit is not resting.
No, I'm saying a life that observes rest is not a lazy life. We are doing probably more productively. It's about making effective the time that you're not resting, because you take the time to rest. So the time that we are doing is more impactful and more focused and more intentional, because I remember in the first lockdown I was going running, like you were as well, I think, but like 2 or 3 or 4 maybe times a week, and we were
only
both
you
okay, that was just me.
Yes.
I was like, I can't just sit around and not move my body. I'm going to go nuts. I want to go running. I want to get out there. But doing that 3 or 4 times a week, it does nothing for you. Like, okay, for some people out there, maybe it does. I don't know. Those people that love running, keep running, fine. But for me, it was not doing anything for my body. It was not helping it. It was probably hurting it, actually. And by changing what I was doing, I'm doing it less times a week, but what I'm doing is more impactful. And it's the same thing with rest. You change, and it always for me comes back to this: principles of the world are always in direct opposition to the principles of the kingdom. It makes no sense to not strive, to not push forward, to not take that risk, to not cram your days full, and to be effective and productive and fruitful, right? But it's the principle of the kingdom is no, you tithe your day, basically. You're giving up. It's not 10th, it's the 7th, but you know, you're giving something that actually is not rightfully yours to keep. It's actually already his. It's sanctified and dedicated time that is set aside by the 10 commandments for us to give to him. And because we observe it and we give it and we do it, he grows the time in the rest of the week. He grows the productivity. He grows the effectiveness and the impact and the ability to grow and bear fruit. So our commitment that we make to resting is actually our commitment to growth.
So good. Let's get practical. Yeah. So, you know, if you're out there and you're listening to this, I think 2 stuff. Number 1, I challenge you to kind of go through a mental exercise of, you know, deciding what day is going to be your rest day and starting to understand what are stress causers. Mm-hmm. Be them not work. Okay, fine, I'm not going to work. But just because you're not working doesn't mean that there's not other things that are coming in there.
Yeah.
And protecting that space and protecting that place by removing them, by, you know, not including them on those days. There's 6 other days for all that stuff, whatever that is. That could be family. That could be so many other things. And start to guard this. Start to understand this is important to God. And so if it's important to God, it needs to be important to us. Mm-hmm. Number 2, schedule it in.
Yeah.
Literally. So if you're have a problem saying no to somebody, you know, open up your diary, write in,
draw a big red cross,
big, you know, square,
it out, not
whatever
available.
It is. Yeah.
No.
And schedule it, give it a name. I'm doing nothing. You know, and when people go, what are you doing on that day? Say, I'm busy, you know, because I'm doing something, you know, that's nothing. That's what I'm doing, you know? And so, you know, purposefully schedule it in to your schedule so that it's there. We refer a lot to this, you know, CrossFit that we're doing right now. You know, what is that really? It's a discipline of going and doing it. So, you know, everybody can work out and they can turn on a YouTube video or go running whenever. But the truth of it is that if it's not in your diary and you're not committed to it, you're not going to do it.
Yeah.
And you know, by joining a club or doing something, it's like this accountability that goes. So make yourself accountable by some means that works. That could be somebody that you're resting with. Let's say, you know, you have almost an accountability partner to resting. Someone else who's also going to do this, who's also going to put rest as a priority because God commanded us to do this. This is God's priority for us. So find someone else who will help you. Find an accountability partner. Find someone who is going to maybe also do it with you, who understands that this is God's will for our life. It's his commandment. It's important to him for us to do it. Pencil it in, schedule it out, you know, and guard it. So put these 2 things in. You know, maybe you have to change what day you go shopping on, right? I know like when we lived in the States for a while and Saturday was the day where you're finally not working and you can run around and you can do, you know, the different things that you need. So yeah, maybe it means you need to sacrifice or change some of the other days in your week to facilitate this, but do it.
Yeah, I think what we learned was, you know, I grew up always observing a Friday night was a family night. Not necessarily because we were doing Shabbat, but it was just our evening as a family that was like a kind of more untouchable thing. And there's 2 things I would recommend. Number 1 is it's about establishing a culture in your home. And if you have kids, it's about, there needs to be a reverence actually to this idea that as a family, this is our rhythm, this is what we do. And that's not to say that you exclude the world. You can invite people into your rest. You can invite people in to your Friday night dinner, to your evening, to your morning. You can have brunch. You know, we often every 2 weeks, we have a congregational meeting on Shabbat. And what I love about how we've set it up is that, first of all, it starts with food. So there's no kind of, I have to be there at 10:30 on the dot. Otherwise, I'm going to be late and I'm going to walk in and they'll have started the meeting and everyone's going to see me and it's going to be embarrassing and there's stress and there's nothing. You walk in, people are chill. People are eating waffles and, you know, enjoying breakfast or brunch or lunch or whatever it is. And it's very relaxed and it's honoring to the fact that this is people's rest day. And so it needs to be chill. And everything that we actually do in our community because they operate on a Friday and a Saturday, those are people's rest days. It needs to honor that. It needs to respect that. And it's part of the culture that we've built. And, you know, growing up in the UK where that culture does not exist, I never felt weird about it growing up. It was just what we did. It was just what happened in our house. And on Saturdays, sometimes we went out shopping, sometimes we did that. But I think the thing I learned from a very young age was that actually the next day begins with the evening before. There's a reason why God did that. If you start your day the night before, you wake up having already rested. It doesn't start the next morning and you've been running around like a headless chicken up until 1 o'clock in the morning the night before because, you know, whatever it is, I've got to try and do this and do that and do that. And I'll rest tomorrow. No, you prepare yourself before that. That's why I love the sundown to sundown day, because actually when you prepare yourself for sundown and you prepare yourself for winding down to an evening kicking off the next day, it sets a completely different tone for the next day. And you wake up in a completely different space than you do in a weekday when you're crazy in the evenings and you've got stuff to do and you have to go shopping at 10 o'clock at night and you've got all this stuff going on. And it's just a very different, you wake up, it's a very different vibe to wake up to.
I think that just delving a little bit here to kind of round it off into the actual commandment. If you look at the 10 commandments about the Sabbath, it says, remember the Sabbath and keep it holy. And this word holy, kadosh, there's a whole study that Andre, our tour guide, does on ISN about it. But basically the meaning is set apart, separate.
Yes.
The idea is that God is separated, you know, and man is separated from God by sin, and that God is holy. He's kadosh. You know, we don't have this idea of, again, the word holy, but the meaning is set apart, separate. And so there needs to be a sundown to sundown in our life that is set apart, that's separate to everything else, and that doesn't look like any other day.
Yeah.
And that day is a day of recharging. That is the day where we can gain perspective. That's the day where we can observe, what is God doing? That's the day where we're not running so quickly, that life is not flashing by us, where we can just take in a breath, you know, and stop for a minute and remember that purpose that God had. That first day, you know, was not a work day. It was not a day of toil. It was a day of looking into the eyes of God and looking into his image and becoming like him.
Yeah, I would just say one final thing is to not feel guilty about how it is that you rest. You know, I think sometimes I've learned this over the years, you know, there are times when people will go, oh, you know, we're going to do this. And for them, it might be a really restful, fun, refreshing thing to do. But for me, it may be the absolute last thing I need. I need quiet away from people. So going on a 3-hour hike with 15 other people is not going to be refreshing to me. It can be in the right moment, but understanding how you're made, understanding what it is you need, and it may change week to week. It may be that sometimes you need people, sometimes you need nobody, and that's okay. Not feeling guilty about recognizing where you're at and what it is you need to rest fully and to rest properly. I know we've both said no to each other about so many different things and sometimes it may be that the next week we say yes to that same thing and it's exactly what we need. But it's okay. The thing that we need to remember is God has made us the way that he's made us to receive rest from him in the way that he specifically designed. And if we are aware of that, he'll always fill it and he'll always bring it if we honor that and are faithful with what he's given us.
Yeah, you know, there's this blessing that we say in Israel as we're entering into Shabbat, and it's Shabbat Shalom, which basically means Shabbat, which is peace, rest, we've already talked about, and then Shalom, which is peace. So this is the blessing that we bless each other, and families bless families, and we say, you know, we sing. Shabbat Shalom, we sing, but also just this blessing, you know, we might message it to each other, you know, on a Friday afternoon.
Actually,
and it basically
everybody says it. Even at the supermarket when you're checking out.
Yeah, when you're leaving
Shalom
on a Friday. And they're blessing you to have a peaceful rest, you know. So this is our blessing to you. Until the next time, until the next episode, Shabbat Shalom.
Yes, we'll see you then. Thanks for stopping by, guys. Make sure you're subscribed so that you never miss an episode. And if you have loved this show, please leave us a rating.
Yeah, we'd so appreciate it. And share it with your friends and your family. We are so excited that you have joined the journey.